Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Impact at Scale podcast with Zal Dastur. Today, my guest is Tamsin Raine, the CEO and co founder of Ocean Culture Live. Hi, Tamsin. Welcome to the show.
Hey Zal, so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, absolute pleasure having you. Can you just give us a bit of an intro into Ocean Culture Live and the work that you're doing?
Sure. So, Ocean Culture Life, OCL for short, is a global global ocean community of ocean storytellers, ocean guardians, and advocates. And I'll break those down a little bit later. But essentially, we're a global community of people that are passionate about the ocean and giving a voice to the ocean. And we believe that, it's our responsibility to do exactly that. The ocean doesn't have a voice, and we need to rally together to give it one.
It's amazing. I once heard someone say that I don't know why we call this planet Earth. It should be water because we are 80%, 70% water, and such little space on the planet is actually terra firma. You have a very interesting background and a background that lends very well to storytelling and communication. Um, how did you find yourself in this position or starting this company?
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's the start of the year, and I was kind of doing a bit of reflecting and looking back on the past 10 years, and it really has been a journey. It's been an amazing journey. I feel like if there's every year there's a bit of growth, even if it comes from pain or if it comes from challenges, then you're heading in the right direction. So I first started off. I always knew that I wanted to learn how to communicate to the masses, and then do it for something that I felt really passionate about. But like a lot of things in life, there's not always that clear path. There's not always that person that's done it before you. And you kind of just lean into that gut feeling of knowing that this is where you want to be, but not quite understanding how you're going to get there. So I grew up in a small, tiny island called Jersey, Channel Islands. It's 9 by 5 miles. We're surrounded by the ocean. We're only ever 10 minutes to the sea. I feel like every single day I woke up, I could see the ocean. I was very lucky and fortunate in the way that um, I was either in the ocean every day or I was near it. So I kind of grew up knowing that, again, I wanted to communicate for something I felt passionate about, but at the time I didn't know it was going to be the ocean. And so I did school. I knew I wanted to travel because I'd grown up on this tiny little rock. So I worked really hard after school and saved enough money to just do that one trip. And then I got the bug. And I love learning from other cultures. I feel like that's how we really truly grow. And a lot of my values, I felt like I was expanding on who I was when I was away from Jersey. Eventually, I chose to study further, and I chose to study advertising and marketing. I felt like I was leaning into my skill set of what I was good at. I was told from an early age I was dyslexic and I never should do that, but it just made me want it more. So I studied at Bournemouth Uni. I studied advertising and marketing, and very much it was straight into essentially consumerism, right? Trying to understand the psychology behind how we make people buy things and how we make people change their behaviors. And it really interested me, thinking about how we can change minds and behaviors based on strategies and communication. So I straight away fell into commercial world, and I didn't hesitate because the people around me were good. I was having a lot of fun doing it, and for me that was joyful. It brought me a lot of joy. So I went straight into Adland. I was working whilst I was doing my degree, and juggling all sorts. I've always been a bit of a relentless worker in respect to that. And I fell into an agency, and was account management for basically big FMCG brands, Mentos, Spin, Chupa Chups, Frutella. The kind of, you know, as I suppose as a uni student coming out of it, it was all really exciting. I learned so much. I had the most incredible team around me. I loved them so much. So I was happy, I was kind of thinking that this is where I need to be. But there was this underlying feeling of pure, just something wasn't right, something wasn't aligning with me. And eventually I came to terms with the fact that it wasn't the people around me, and certainly wasn't my clients. It was the messaging that I was supporting, because essentially I was working in my mind to poison the minds of children every day. That's how I felt. But I didn't really understand. I didn't know that at the time. And it wasn't until 6 and nearly 7 years ago now, I was traveling home every other month because I had a family illness, and I met a guy called Matt Porteous, who's an incredible photographer, but first and foremost, an incredible human and storyteller. And this was about the time when, Instagram and social media was really kind of at its prime. You could, as a brand, as a client, we could get a lot of reach and impact for not so much money compared to the traditional media methods. So I started thinking about how we could cut through with good storytelling, essentially, and then not so much media budget. So I started consulting for charities, essentially, and for brands that I really felt like I could align my values with. Because in the agency, it was hard to do that. You got given your clients, and there was big budgets, and you're kind of stuck to what you were told to do. So I started consulting. I met Matt, and Matt at the time, his underwater photography just drew me straight in, and we had a good chat. And essentially, he had this concept around um, building a community of ocean storytellers. He was passionate about the ocean. I was passionate about the ocean. I started thinking about how we could give a voice to the ocean through less traditional media techniques, because the ocean didn't have an advertising budget. And I really felt like the ocean really didn't have a voice, because we were very, well, we still are to this day, facing the challenges around people's lack of understanding about what the ocean does for us and what it brings to us. So that's essentially where the idea was planted. And Matt at the time also had a commercial photography and photography business. And so I basically took the leap. I moved home. I started running the commercial business for him. We built that really successfully, built a big team. We started integrating film and other techniques to, like, essentially offering more services to build that. And my thought was, if we build that and we make enough money, again, we've got to choose our clients. So we were really lucky in the fact that we were still impact led, passionate storytellers around clients that we wanted to work with. We could make enough money, and then we could essentially fund ocean stories, and we could fund these stories. But that, at the time, I didn't know, but obviously that wasn't the right model, because there's not really a massive kind of longevity with that. So eventually, over the years, we put so much into it. We just carried on doing as much as we could commercially to then fund these little stories. And then we started realizing that the impact of these ocean stories, is there a way to get these funded? If we can deliver the impact and we can show what impact these stories are having, there's got to be a way that we can get these funded. And then that's when OCL started to really become less of a passion project and more of an actual, entity, if you like. And we enrolled as a charity just 2 years ago. We're only 2 years old as a charity, and we're doing things very differently to a typical charity, I like to think. And over the last few years, we really have built organically into arguably one of the biggest ocean communities out there. And they are just, honestly, the people within our community work tirelessly day in, day out to give a voice to the ocean, whether that's through storytelling or whether they're guardians. So guardians are organizations and individuals that work actively in ocean conservation. So, there might be a marine scientist, your marine biologist, or, somebody that's leading and spearing a message within an organization, and they're working actively in the ocean space day in, day out. And a storyteller might be somebody that has a camera on the weekends. They might be full blown, filmmaker, documentary filmmaker. They could be an artist. They could use music to express how they feel, or, there's lots of different mediums of what a storyteller is today. And then we have our advocates, and our advocates are people that are passionate about the ocean. They might walk their dog on the beach every day. They might be wanting to learn more, but they're passionate about helping to learn more about the ocean or protect the ocean, and they go out in their own way to do that. There's a place and there's a home for everybody within the community. And I've just gone on for ages there. I don't know if I've completely. Oh, I can't. Sorry, I can't hear you.
It's no, absolutely great. It's the idea of finding your purpose, and obviously what you said is in a bit of a roundabout way, right? You were poisoning children, which my partner turned down a job at a large confectionery company because she said, I cannot be part of an organization that is trying to sell more sugar to children.
Yeah.
And that's a really brave and difficult choice. And I think there are a lot of people that listen a lot of people that listen to this show are already in sustainability, but a lot of people want to get into it and want to do something. And they're a little bit like I was a couple of years ago, where you say, okay, how do I guess the question is, do you have any advice out there for people on how they can listen to that voice inside, or, what is it that they should be tuning into to
Mm.
understand what that purpose is?
Yeah, totally. Honestly, I just told you before, it wasn't necessarily like I woke up one day and thought I can't do this anymore, because we all have bills to pay. We all have, realistically, the reason we're there in the first place a lot of the time is to be able to bring in a wage, to be able to provide, etc. But this underlying niggle, I call it the niggle, right? And I think we all maybe have it when you walk into a room and something's not right, it's that gut feeling. So lean into the gut feeling, and I think a lot of the time it's about going back to your values. It's about going back to your deep rooted values, what you can and what you can't stand for. And eventually, after years and years in the job, and really understanding, but why am I not happy? I've got an amazing team. Because my comparison kept coming down to what societal norms were, right? I had a good job. I was in a happy relationship. I lived in a beautiful home in Bournemouth. I'd just finished my degree. All these things, the tick boxes were all there. But fundamentally, this niggle was still there too. So it was about peeling it back and kind of trying to realize, well, it's not this and it's not that. I've got a great team. I love my job. Fundamentally, what wasn't sticking, if you like, was this core value, this message around this. So I think it wasn't about me, like I said, just going in and handing in my notice and saying, see you later, I'm going to go and figure it out. You have to try and figure it out whilst you're trying to figure it out, if that makes sense. So for me, I started consulting on the side, and trying to figure out, well, is this sustainable? Is this something that could be a career? Because I can't just drop ship and run away. And I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people can be quite like, impromptu, like, this isn't right and I'm going to do this. And I think a lot of the time in relationships, we do that too, right? If it's not working, don't make it work. You just run away and figure it out. Arguably, some people can. But for me, it was about that gradual transition. So I think surround yourself with people that you are inspired by, that have maybe done something that you are inspired by. Ask them questions, and just lean into that feeling of utter kind of determination that you can do this, because there always is another path. That's what I believe. And this path has taken me a lot longer. But the race is long. And again, what it comes down to a lot of the time is constant comparison. So if you're constantly comparing yourself to your neighbor or your best friend that's just got that job promotion and got that bigger house and that nicer car, does that matter to you? Because it didn't matter to me. I've learned that. At the time, I thought it did. At the time, I thought, but I want that nice house and I want those nice things. Those things have never mattered to me. I've not been brought up that way. And I don't think they won't ever matter to me. That's not what brings me joy. And I think that's what you've got to think of. Because if those things do you bring you joy, and you need that big paycheck at the end of the month to buy that Louis Vuitton handbag and to have that Porsche in your driveway, then that's what matters to you, and that's totally okay. But everyone's different.
I mean, in reality, I don't think that there's anybody that genuinely brings joy to, but
Hmm.
there is and you came from advertising, and in the space of
Yeah.
advertising, you are designing campaigns that will make people believe that this will bring them joy, or this
Yeah.
will bring them status, or this will bring them value.
Hmm.
And that's what we think. I I often wonder, people that drive very nice cars, do they drive the car because they like the sensation of driving, or do they drive the car because they like the idea that other people will look at them and have some more respect for them? When in reality, you know, I like cars myself. I like Formula One. When I see Ferraris, I love them. But I'm never looking at the person in the Ferrari thinking like, oh, I want to be him. I'm just like, oh, that's a really nice car. So it's a really weird thing, because people ultimately aren't thinking about you. And I
Yeah.
think it's a weird, we don't understand that. But let's talk a little bit about the ocean. So talk to me about what ocean literacy means, and why is it critical for restoring our oceans?
Yeah, of course. So I think I'll start with the fact that, I mean, you mentioned it before, the ocean covers 70% of our planet. It generates over half the oxygen we breathe. It's the main protein food source for 3 billion people on Earth. It really is the life support to our planet. And I think if more of us are to understand exactly that, we certainly wouldn't be doing half of the things that we're doing. And we certainly wouldn't be buying into the products that we buy into today and the businesses that we trust to look after our money. We would be second guessing certain things, and we'd be looking more closely at our consumer choices and our way of life. So ocean literacy is essentially our understanding and our appreciation for the ocean. It's understanding what role the ocean plays in the ecosystem. It's understanding what the ocean does for us as human beings. Um, and also just understand, like allowing that next generation to understand what the ocean can be, what resource it can be. So it's really important to improve people's understanding of the ocean in order for them to care. Because if they don't care, then there's not going to be the action. It's essentially going back to that advertising standard practice, right? Of changing behaviors, thoughts, and minds. And behaviors don't change overnight. They don't. They just don't, especially in the world we're in today. So the need to improve ocean literacy is actually pivotal, and it's part of the UN Ocean Decades kind of plan. It has to be there, and arguably for me, it's the most important part because if you inspire, then that's when people start thinking about what actions they can take. And we need collective action. We need collective action in order to help restore health to our oceans. So improving ocean literacy is key to that.
And how do you, because it was so interesting. You were talking about growing up in Jersey and the fact that you were never more than, 10 minutes from the ocean. I also grew up and still currently live on a small island in Singapore, not as small as Jersey, but very small. And I can't think of anyone that lives in Singapore that has ever talked about the ocean the same way that you do. And not
Mm.
that we can see it from everywhere, but you can see it from a lot of places. And obviously, Singapore is a huge port city, so the ocean is what brought money to the country. How do you then sort of engage with these people that feel disconnected from it, or even here live so close to it but have no affinity or love for it?
Yeah, often it's out of sight, out of mind, isn't it? It comes back down to think right back to your childhood. If you were lucky enough to have, a parent or a guardian read you a story at bedtime, or you consume media back in the day, maybe you'd been watch The Little Mermaid, you'd watch films, you'd watch Disney, you'd feel inspired and you'd look up to these Disney characters or those around you that you aspire to be like. So it comes back down to stories. Storytelling is so crucial and so important to cut through that noise and to make people feel something because we look out to sea, we see the horizon, we see blue. We don't see what is happening below the surface. And sometimes when you see a ship on the shoreline, you think you don't really can make the connection as to the clothes we're wearing have been transported over the ocean, or the food we're eating has come from another country and made it to our plates thanks to that vessel. That connection to the sea is not there, and storytelling really can transition and cut through borders because you and I are lucky enough to live near the ocean, but there's a lot of communities that can't see the sea, are nowhere near the ocean, and therefore, how can we even expect them to want to care? Because a lot of the time, being near the sea often means that we have some sort of enjoyment factor, even if it's just looking at it. There's a lot of science to suggest that even looking at the ocean brings us tranquility, brings us joy. It's the blue mind, right? I grew up surfing, I grew up in the ocean, and it brought me so much joy in terms of just the recreational way that we, enjoy it. So I think winning hearts and minds comes back down to how we storytell, but also the techniques in which we storytell. I think that's really important because we consume media daily. Every day we're scrolling and it can be quite a scary place. It can be dooming. You consume all of these stories about how the ocean's in trouble, how the ocean's dying. and you feel overwhelmed, and you certainly don't feel like you as an individual can help. So at OCR, we really focus in on positive storytelling, how we can inspire people by showcasing those that are already doing incredible things and inspire them to be part of that change and part of that movement and give them hope. Because if we don't have that hope, then I don't really think that we have the ability to change the direction that we're heading in. And so it's really important that these stories deliver these positive messages and messages of hope.
I couldn't agree more. My day job is helping companies and clients with their storytelling, and the impact that a good story can have to understand the messaging that you're trying to convey. It's so important. Have you got some examples of the stories that OCL is told that you found have really connected with people?
Yeah, definitely. Excuse me. I think there's been a lot. There's been a hell of a lot. And we offer storytelling grants every year, which allows our community to access a small pot of funding in order to tell these stories of either ocean guardians or ocean communities. But recently there's been one, and it's actually the world's largest coral restoration project that not a lot of people have heard of. And it is funded and supported by Mars Sustainable Solutions, Mars, the conglomerate company. What they have done, what Mars has been able to do in order to deliver the world's largest coral restoration project, which has had incredible impact, not just on our oceans and the ocean communities that live within these certain areas that they're doing the restoration, but it's really given me hope in terms of what companies like that of that size have the potential and the power to do. And the reason they have that power isn't just because of the money that they can put into it. It's actually because of the infrastructure that they already have as an organization. If we're to restore health to the oceans, we all know, well, we don't all know the importance of coral. This is one of the things that they're actually doing an incredible job of, and what the role we're playing as storytellers. But if we're able to restore coral at this scale that we hope to, and restore health to the oceans through, in fact, I'm just going to start that again because I feel like I've completely lost track there. So back to Mars. So the reason I think Mars have an incredible advantage of being part of this story is the infrastructure they already have as an organization. So they're able to scale up quickly the efforts of the restoration. Whereas other organizations, especially in the ocean space, we find it very hard to secure funding, and it comes back down to people's understanding of the ocean and the role it plays. But Mars is an organization and a conglomerate, they're already well positioned. So we've already seen this scale, this rapid kind of increase in the scale and of this, and therefore this impact. Now, if we tell that story of that impact and that rapid growth, we're then able to secure potentially more funding for other areas in the ocean that need help, right? So we've been able to play a role in the storytelling of two things, not just the need and necessity to restore coral and what role coral plays, but also the role that businesses can play. And I think those two stories of hope really do cut through and have cut through. And I think what's even more beautiful is that the brand themselves, they've actually created a coral restoration spot in Indonesia. So they've got an incredible site that spells out the letters HOPE, so hope. And that as a piece of creative for us to push has been wonderful too. But I think that story has been really positive. It's been impact driven. And you can really see the kind of stages between thought process and the impact. And I really hope that as this program expands and as our community continue to tell that story, we're also having further impact, because by them engaging us to tell the story, we're able to fund even more storytellers within our community. And all of a sudden, instead of engaging, agencies like typical brands do, we've got this beautiful circular model that's coming into play. And that's what I really love about our relationship with not just Mars, but also this how we storytell. We lean into local storytellers. We fund local storytellers, which in turn deliver local mentorship opportunities. And it's much more circular than the old production workflow, which I've been susceptible to in the past.
And how are you seeing these stories connect with the everyday person? Are you seeing them have an impact? And then, sort of, what are the actions that they then take, or what are the understandings that they are learning as a part
Mm.
of that?
Yeah, I think again this comes back down to Mars is a great example because they're a business, right? So you might be watching it as I don't know, CEO of another confectionery brand, or you might be watching it as a somebody that's about to start up a business about how maybe to do things. You also might be watching it as somebody that is thinking about going into ocean conservation, not knowing where to start, and you might be looking at it more from a, oh, I would love to be part of coral restoration because I understand the impact that and the importance of that. So I think it wins hearts and minds in completely different ways depending on the person that's viewing it. And as storytellers, we always have to be mindful of that. What's the what's the objective of this story, or is it just to inspire the masses? And I think that does also come down to placement. But for us, it really is about thinking about who that end consumer is, but more so about the people within the story that we feel can inspire because people can relate to them. So it is quite, I suppose, vast in that respect.
So one thing that I was really impressed with, when I was reading about your company and the work that you do, is how you fostered this sense of global community with OCL. And I think at a time when we are more connected than ever, physically, phones,
Mhm.
internet, all of that, but more disconnected than ever from the planet and to a large extent each other. How, what are some of the tactics, the strategies that you've used that have helped to foster that sense of global community?
Honestly, it comes back down to what the ocean gives all of us, and it gives us all something wildly different. And our community is global. I speak to people on different time zones every single day. But one thing that connects us all is this love, appreciation, and understanding of the ocean and what it does for us. And I think, honestly, that's why our community has been able to grow so rapidly and so quickly. We're all connected by the big blue, and we are therefore, we a lot of us naturally migrate either with, a lot of the storytellers are following wildlife to tell these stories, or some people are, actually forced out of their local communities because of what challenges we face within, climate change. And everybody is of an understanding that we absolutely need to roll together and get together, and that has to be collaboration over competition, otherwise we just simply don't face a chance. So I think the ability to build this community, it hasn't been us setting out to go, oh, we need to onboard X amount of people, and we need to deliver the. It's not about the numbers for us, and you'll see that in our community. We're small and mighty. We have a couple of thousand people that are active within the community, but that is only going to grow because of our love and connection with the ocean and people's want and need to learn more about the sea in order to protect it. So I think it's been a natural organic thing over a few years, but it's only going to get a lot bigger as we start delivering this impact together, which we're doing as a community.
Have you faced any challenges in this collaborative versus competition kind of ethos? It's not something that we are really trained or raised to do in this world. It's, dog eat dog, and you have to beat the, law of the jungle, and there's all of that sort of stuff, which is really about being competitive with other people. So, what are some of the challenges that you've seen in that case?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a challenge. I think the biggest thing, honestly, Zal, is ego. It comes back down to people's ego, and it really is about removing that where you can. And I always just ask people the question about, like, why. Why it comes back down to your why. It comes back down to your purpose. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to say you did this? Are you doing this because you want to be the first to do something, or you want to own something, or are you doing this for that bigger reason, that big picture? And I think honestly, over the last kind of 7 years, 6, 7 years, I've been able to quickly figure that part out before we find our partners in purpose, or before we really do collaborate with a brand. And there's been a lot of brands, and there's been a lot of corporate partners that we've also said no to because of that. But hey, we get it wrong sometimes. We're not all the best judge of character, and I honestly think that going through those lessons and those learnings become part of your journey, and I think they're important too. So, and another thing that I'd say to people is, if people really feel like they've been burned or screwed over because this person wasn't aligned with their values, start again. I did. I've done it on a couple of occasions, and just know that if you can sleep at night knowing that you're doing what is is the right thing, because the ocean is bigger than all of us. It really is. It's bigger than every single one of us, and at the end of the day, it's not going to matter what car we have on the driveway if we are unable to essentially live and breathe because our oceans are dying. So it comes back down to that.
Let me look into that a little bit, because it's something that, it kind of relates a little bit back to what we were talking about, people's status and the value is like, how do you check for ego? How do you measure ego? How do you control and tame that?
I think ego, it comes back down. We're gonna get deep now. It comes back down to insecurities. Okay, fundamentally, what do we need as humans to exist? That comes back down to, okay, well, we need food and we need shelter and we need love. And everything else, in my opinion, and this is solely purely my opinion, is noise, right? It comes back down to, well, I need to earn enough money in order to not just have a house and a roof over my head, but I want the nicest, bestest, beautifulest designer, everything house over my head. But fundamentally, the two serve the same purpose, right? So everything else in between, this noise that essentially has come from my industry, my ex industry, advertising and consumerism and symbolism, and sometimes religion, comes down to um, the society that we live in and the culture that we live in. And I think we've just lost our way a little bit, if I'm completely honest, especially in the Western world. We really have, and that is arguably why we're in some of the trouble we're in today. And I think that ego comes from the need and a want to be a certain status. And I think it's just sometimes about taking check and understanding whether that, again, is what makes you happy. And if it is what makes you, why? Ask yourself why. And I think sometimes if you ask yourself why enough, you'll probably come back down to a decision that is fundamentally from a preconceived kind of belief based on either fear or not belonging or lack of love, and lack of identity. And that's what I've learned over the last few years.
I think I heard somewhere that it's 7 whys. So if
Mm.
you feel something and you literally say, whatever I want this, why? And then why do you want that? And why? And if by the time you get to the fifth or the seventh, you've kind of really understood, like, what is the core feeling, emotion that you're missing. And, you say that the Western world, and I agree to a large extent, but I live in Asia. And to me, Asia seems the most sort of consumer driven part of the world right now, because it is the part
Mm.
of the world that is stepping into its wealth. And I feel that, if you go to Europe, the wealthiest people in Europe don't wear Louis Vuitton monogrammed hats because it's seen to be a bit crass. Whereas in Asia, I mean, if I walk down Orchard Road here in Singapore, guarantee I will find people, like dozens and dozens of people, with Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga, all these brands, because it is that display of status. And status isn't a new thing. I love this book, The Status Game,
Mm.
where it basically talks about how humans are status driven creatures. And so something for me is like, how do we turn the planet, how do we turn sustainability, how do we turn caring for the planet into something that is high status? Because if you're able to do that, then the whole world's mindset changes, and we're able to then focus on the things that really do matter, because we're saying, hey, this is something that we see as being high status, is this being high value. I don't have the answer to that. I think if I did, I would probably be controlling an organization very large if I knew what to do. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, in that space, that it is, we are status driven, and the problem with status, unlike money and unlike power, is you can never get enough of it. It's an unlimited, unquenching desire to be in status. So the I think what would be good for us to sort of come to the last couple of questions is around money, because that's really what makes the world go round at this point. And so how are you seeing, or so how can investors or corporations shift their priorities to support more ocean health initiatives? What's the carrot at the end of that stick that lets them do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was once told by an amazing guy called Andrew Mitchell, if we don't change the movement of money, we'll finance ourselves into extinction. And I completely hear him and understand what he's saying, because 70% of all carbon emissions come from 100 companies. And I think that's quite scary to think that we as consumers, when we put our money in, and this is something that I've only very recently learned over the last 5 years out. It's not something that I was taught. I did not have a very good financial education, if you like, growing up. I don't come from a family with lots of money. I didn't come from that kind of world and industry. So I've had to self educate myself around this and read a lot of books and speak to people and listen to lots of podcasts around it. And I think it's really important to do so, because our money, when it's sat in a bank, is obviously invested, right? So let's start really simple. Now, one of the biggest things that I would always ask people to do is simple. Look into what bank you bank with, and look into what pension fund, where your pension funds are if you have a pension. They're two things that arguably we can all do as citizens and have the power there in our own hands, because believe it or not, that bank or that pension fund might be directly funding something that you're campaigning against every single day. And that's a really simple thing that we can do. So I think, and as organizations and as corporations, there are also banks standing up and saying, we're not going anywhere near deep seabed mining, because that is unaligned with our values. And that comes from people within organizations. So I'm going to say, if you work in bank, if you work in investments, be a voice for the ocean, be a voice for the environment, do what's right. And if it does seem like, okay, but this is going to take longer and it's going to be harder, I'm going back to what I said at the start. The race is long. There's never that, I'm going to get there because this person's done it before and I'm going to follow their footsteps. Often when you want to change something, there isn't an easy route. There's not someone before you that's done it. But just know that's the right thing to do and do it.
There was a study done out of Sweden, where basically what they said was, if you take 1x as the baseline, if you are doing everything right, so you're a vegetarian, you're recycling, you're trying to be in the circular economy, you are the prototypical perfectly sustainable human, which honestly I don't think anybody on the planet is. But if you are that is 1x.
Yeah.
Changing where you invest your retirement and your super, or your whatever retirement scheme you have in your country, that makes you 12x. So it's 12 times the impact of just making a decision of, hey, I want to put my retirement or whatever it is that you have in your country towards organizations that invest in sustainable, or at least non-harmful companies. The really amazing thing was, I think it was like a 28x was if you vote for politicians that have that belief and that, and it shocks me to this day that we still have, like, people, the Green Party, and the Green Party gets like 1 vote or 2 votes. Somebody the other day, I was at a birthday dinner, and the problem with being climate aware, let's put it like that, is that anytime somebody raises an issue, you're like, climate change, like, that's the reason why we're getting hotter. That's the reason why, this is happening, climate change. And somebody looked across the table from me, and said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were such a greenie." And they were saying it with such a negative context. And this idea of like, you know, we have one planet, and trying to give a voice to where we live. Why is that? Why is that being criticized, or why is that being judged? And I think it's exactly what you said, right? We come from a society where there's so much of the material that is valued. And so we have been led to believe that supporting the planet because it doesn't make profit for business is bad. And we've kind of been brainwashed that, oh, you're a hippie or you're all these things. And to me, I was just like, we have no life without the planet. We have no business. It's like that great. Have you seen that cartoon of a man sitting in a cave with two children, and it looks like a post-apocalyptic future, and the line above it says, you know, for a while there, we really did create some shareholder value. You know, it's like, what is that? What is shareholder value if we're destroying the planet that we live on? And it's so interesting to think how all of our minds have been shaped by corporates
Yeah.
in
But
ways that we don't even know.
when you were sat in that room and that one person said, "Oh, I didn't realize, you were such a greenie," you've also then got a community behind you like OCL. And this is why the community feels, essentially a community is a culture. Culture is something we all identify with, right? That's why we're called Ocean Culture Life, because we all identify or feel something towards this life support of our planet. So there's lots of us greenies or the blue, whatever you want to call them. And we, like you were saying before, we don't all have the answers. We're not all doing it right. Individuals and corporations and organizations, but fundamentally you cannot argue the fact that if there is no healthy ocean, then we don't, that the science is there. There's nothing to argue. So you've just got to come back to that fact. And I do believe, going back to status, I do honestly believe, Zal, that is that, that next generation, and there's more people waking up and becoming conscious of this circular way of living, that we have to go back, and we have to go back to how it once was. There isn't room for even more growth and more companies to make trillions of dollars and pounds and not give a crap about what we're doing, what impact we're having. And we're either going to learn the hard way. But I do think there's enough of us, and that's what comes back to community and hope and stories that can give us hope, because it can be overwhelming. And there's so many people that say to me, I can't, what can I do? And I always say, it was a good friend of mine, Danny Washington, once said to me, there's 8 billion of us on this planet, and that with one singular action, that's a lot of X's. So can we just all just take a moment to think about that one thing that we can all be doing differently? And leaning into the fact, one thing I will say quickly is I do a lot of talks in corporations, and there's been a few corporate talks that I've done. The corporate has then come back to us and said, we love what you're doing, we love your mission, we want to be part of it, can we sign up to a beach clean? And I say to them, you can absolutely do a beach clean. There's an organization called Little Feet in Jersey that we can put you in contact with. No, we want to do it with you. Why do you want to do it with us? That's not something that we offer, but we're going to put you in contact with a guardian that's going to do that. If you want to deliver real impact with us, let's look at what you do as a firm, right? You're a firm of accountants, you're a firm of lawyers. Your skill set for other charities and other organizations, or even just your connections that you can make, is incredible. So if you want to volunteer a little bit of your time in your own skill set, in your own lane, fantastic. Let's have a chat. But if you want to go and do a beach clean, you want to do some team building, fantastic. Here's another organization that can help you with that. Coming back down to it, is the reason that they wanted to do it with us because they wanted to be aligned with us in order to do that LinkedIn post and et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to really think, yes, okay, they're going to have impact by doing a beach clean, but what real impact can they really help us have? And I say to everybody, stay in your lane where you can and provide those services. I've got so many friends in finance that go, oh, you have so much purpose. And you guys are in the driver's seat. You are literally there. You can deliver 10x impact on what I can do in a day sometimes. Just reshift your thinking. Look at it in a different way, because I do believe that, we all can deliver that impact. We just have to believe we can.
I mean, to leave us on a bit of an uplifting note, there was a Harvard researcher who was looking at how to make social change and social impact, and actually the study was based on whether violent or non-violent methods work. Her actual thesis was that violent methods work, and she found that overwhelmingly it was non-violent. And what she found incredible was it either required like 2.5 or 3.5% of the country's population to be in a single protest to enact that change. And when you think about what a tiny percentage that is, because they meant that if you could get 3.5% of the population in that, it means that tacitly there was a huge, larger number that had agreed to it. It created that change. And so, that's the number that I often go back to when I'm feeling really disheartened, which is we only need to find, I'm going to double it. I'm going to say 5%, right? We only need 5% of the world to really care, to make that kind of an impact and to have that social like impact and the sort of outreach. Tamsin, how can people reach out? What's the best way to connect with you? What's the best way to connect with OCL? What can they do if they want to be involved with you?
Yeah, so we've just launched our new platforms out on oceanculturelife.com, and it's free to join. It's free to join the community. You can host your own private event. Gosh, there's so much you can do. I'm not even going to go into it now. Head to oceanculturelife.com and register. Connect with us on there. You can also connect on via LinkedIn, all the socials. I would love to hear from some of you, because honestly, your podcast, Sal, and podcasts of many it's for me over the last few years, listening to podcasts and learning from other people has been fundamental in not just my personal growth, but the growth of the charity and the organization, because I learn so much from them. I get inspired by them, by the people every day. And I just think that they're just fundamental to what we need. I think sometimes we can just put our headphones in and get lost on a walk and come away feeling more motivated and more inspired by those that are doing incredible things. So I also do reach out to people, and everyone always, and most of the time people do take the time to get back to you. And I think that's really important. And our community are great at that too. So if there's anyone within our community too that you want to reach out to, please do via the platform. Just reach out to them.
Absolutely. Tamsin, it was so great chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.